Hello and welcome to Autistic FM. My name is Haje. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm your local pun master extraordinaire. You can subscribe to Autistic FM wherever you get your podcasts, and it would be really awesome if you did. That's how we grow and thrive. Over on our website at autistic.fm, you can find episodes, transcripts, and additional information. We also have discussion threads for each individual episode, a neurospicy discussion forum, and much, much more. And all of that is free. If you become a supporter for as little as $5 a month, you can get a sneak preview of the topics we have coming up and even submit questions for our guests. You can also add topics to our future topics wish list, and you can get access to a supporters-only discussion group. We have a bunch of additional supporter treats coming up, so stay tuned. In this episode of the podcast, I'm joined by Phillip, who is navigating the intersection of autism, complex PTSD, and addiction recovery. Phillip's story is a testament to resilience and the power of self-discovery. He opens up about the challenges he faced growing up in an abusive environment. His journey through self-awareness, and the process of embracing his neurodivergent identity. Our conversation spans the breadth of his experiences, from grappling with his past traumas to finding healing and community within support groups like AA. This episode explores his personal insights into creating a user manual of sorts for himself. And it turns out that is his lived roadmap to understanding who he is and what he needs from life. Here's a quick trigger warning for this episode. We do discuss complex PTSD, childhood abuse, experiences of addiction, and we do mention suicidal ideation as well. We don't go into a huge amount of graphic detail with any of this, but please do look after yourself and listen accordingly. I'm super psyched about this episode, so let me just hit play and see where we go. Hello and welcome back to Autistic FM. I am joined by a wonderful guest. Wonderful guest! What is your name and your pronouns?
Hi, my name is Phillip, and I use he, him.
Wonderful. And where in the world are you?
Brooklyn, New York.
Awesome. And thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm curious, what is your history with your neurospiciness and what form of neurospicy are you?
What a funny question. Not funny, it's expected.
What flavor of neurospicy?
I'll be 41 in a month, and when I was 32 was the first time I asked the question, am I neurodivergent, specifically autistic? And it was after I had listened to this podcast with my boyfriend at the time, and we were both like, oh, that's you. I had this really complicated childhood, and so I sought some help, and the sort of decision at the time was that I was in cPTSD, and that autism and cPTSD have a lot of alignment, and so went down the rabbit hole of addressing some of that stuff. And it was only through the nervous system re-regulating process that I actually got down to the core of what I am. And then about 2 years ago, I was like, oh yeah, we're healthy, but we're still also neurodivergent.
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's so interesting you bring up cPTSD. For the listeners, that's complex post-traumatic stress syndrome. And basically, the complex part means it's ongoing. It's like PTSD in general is, oh, there was a big disaster and it affected you. Complex PTSD is, it's over many years or over a long period of time, there's been stressors. And there was this interesting piece of research that came out recently that said it's very difficult to tease complex PTSD apart from autism, especially with late diagnosed folks, because of course you've been under constant trauma. You haven't figured out the world. You don't know why these things are happening to you, right? And so from a diagnostic point of view, almost everybody who's late diagnosed autistic also ends up with a cPTSD diagnosis because you don't make it. I'm still not officially diagnosed, but I'm very sure. But I'm 43 years old, right? And I'm like, okay, well, the first 40 years of my life, I felt weird, but I didn't understand why. And of course that's stressful.
Yeah. And for me, it was just I just had this, there's no way to sugarcoat it, just highly abusive childhood. It was physically abusive. It was neglectful. I came out when I was 20 and there was homophobia. It was just all of this stuff. Not addressing or fitting in the world was a problem, but it wasn't my most urgent problem, right? Staying safe had been my problem for 40 or 38 years. And so it wasn't until I started discovering that I'm safe. I know how to regulate myself. I don't exist in these huge extreme swings any longer. That I was oh yeah, but you're still a funny guy. I'm a happy funny guy, but I'm a funny guy.
Right. What shape does your funny take?
So I've heard you describe yourself as really smart, and I think that I'm also pretty smart. And I think that like when you view the world having a bit more data and like a few more mental models and like a bottoms up kind of way of viewing things, like you just exist differently than most people. And that's always been my case. I've designed my life almost by accident, but maybe subconsciously, intentionally. I build big systems, I build companies. I like endless complexity and I like ideas that build on top of each other. And I, for whatever reason, was given like the ability to keep track of a lot of it and do it pretty efficiently. And so it's other people, I know neurodivergents are particularly big fans of small talk, but I really want to talk about big problems. And it's hard to find a place in the world where that makes sense and like where you get your itches scratched, so to speak. And
Did
so
you
that
find that place?
I am increasingly finding that place. And like it's been intentional. I think a lot about my model for how like to keep Phillip happy exists. And there's a lot of energy in a day and there's a lot of cognition and you have to burn it. And like you have to burn it pretty consistently and it has to be diverse. And so my life right now is very there's just a lot of different kinds of things in it. And that generally keeps me level. It's like learning a language, building a business, doing art classes.
Hmm.
Like I just need this like variety of stuff. And so within that, like I don't need any one human to be all of those things anymore because I've
Hmm.
getting very good at nurturing people who really like the specific topics I do and like finding them, going deep on it, and then moving to the next one.
Right. I just suddenly had this vision of you as a Siberian husky having to be run every day to be able
It,
to
it
zoom these out.
sounds It sounds so silly. So if I want to be happy, like it really do have to work at it. There's no watching TV every day. There just has to be these things. And it's fun because like I'm in a phase right now where I'm like fully activated on a bunch of different things. And
Hmm.
there's no happier version of me. I never stop laughing. I never stop having fun. I never stop like being in the problem. And it's just where I'm happiest.
That
And
is
like
one.
to have found it is has been, I guess, the gift of midlife, right? You
Right.
like, get to a place where you're like, I am done playing all the games. I'm just gonna do it the way I want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many things there that I recognize. That's amazing. One of the tools you created is very public. There's a website where you describe in quite a lot of detail, like how to interact with you and your own strengths and weaknesses in a very honest and helpful way. And I'm curious, like, what spurred that? Like, just for the listener's purpose, the reason why I'm doing this podcast is that I'm writing a book called The Care and Feeding Guide to Your Pet Autist. And the idea basically being like, okay, this is something that neurotypical people need to be aware of when you're in a friendship, lovership,
Mhm.
situationship, whatever, with an autistic person. And your site was actually like, oh, awesome. This is like a really close analogy to that. And I'm super curious how that came about and why you made it.
Yeah. So for context, my parents are pretty narcissistic, if not actual pathological narcissists. And like I was the oldest child. And so I was raised in this world where it's basically this like tool that had been like honed to take care of other people. And that persisted for my whole adulthood until recently. And when you are responsible for everybody else, you don't understand who you are. And when you are playing games because you're afraid, like you're playing the game, like the game of life,
Mhm.
because you're terrified, then you're never making choices that are particularly good for you. And you never really understand who you are, what you need, and like how you operate. And so about 3 years ago, almost to the day, actually, I had been building this company. It had been relatively successful, and I was fired. Not for performance. Early stage companies are complicated, and like we could do a whole podcast on that one. But
That's my world too.
yeah, yeah, I know. And I was fired, and founders get fired all the time. It is what it is. But what had happened was, I like, whether real or imagined, I took on a lot of blame internally, right? And all of my fuck ups. And right after that, my life just went down. I had a really bad year. And I started, I think, actually finally untangling this idea of the I can't do this for another 40 years problem.
Mm.
And as I started thinking about it, and as I started like trying to just put myself back together in these little ways and understand who the hell I was, it became really obvious to me that like I had no touchstone for the version of myself that existed internally. And like I had no rule book. And it sounds really strange to say that, but it's like I felt like I was so deep, like all of my boundaries have been determined by empathy, not by my needs. And like
Mm.
my whole world had been constructed around other people and transactions and thinking that my entire value to this planet and to every other human was the thing I would do for you, the money I would give you, the paycheck I would sign. And so I moved to Spain for a bit and I was just like, I just want to know who the fuck I am. And so I went and basically for 3 months sat every day and wrote for 5 hours. And so what's online is probably we'll call it the PG version, because I documented everything. I was like, these
Mhm.
things happened to me. Like these were my mistakes, right? There's a failure resume with it on my site. And it was just one of those things that I don't know where it came from, but I wanted a user manual for myself. And then it became this like tool that I used all of last year because I published it about a year and a half ago. That every time I started feeling highly insecure or super unsure or like just lost in that uncanny valley that can be your brain, I just would go and I would read it. And I would read it because it was like, no, this, some of it was aspirational, some of it was reality as it exists. None of it was a lie. That was the truth, was that like I couldn't tell any lies. There couldn't be white lies about anything. It needed to be as foundationally accurate as I at the moment understood it. And you could say that the real beginning of my healing journey. There were a lot of bottomings out before, right? There's just a lot of failed successes, a lot of different ideas of thinking about what this was going to look like. But that was like the first time I put myself together. And it's wild. People have the funniest reactions to it, right? Some people think it's incredible, and then other people are like, this is dangerous. People are going to judge you for it. And I was like, I don't care about being judged anymore. I just don't care.
Well, and maybe
Um,
the right people will judge you.
yeah. I was
As
like,
in the
if it's a
people you don't want in your life anyway. It's like, cool, judge me
right.
all you like, but you can fuck right off.
Oh my God, I love a forcing function. Like, I love
Right?
a forcing function. I mentor somebody and I was telling them recently, I was like, you got clarity. That's a gift. Like, you get to make better choices now. Like, new information isn't by nature bad. And that's what this user manual was. It took a lot of time, it took a lot of energy. I read it now and I'm like, oh, you've changed a little bit. And so I'll turn 41 next month. And my plan is to go and update it and put it as a catalog and maybe do it on a yearly basis. Cause it just seems like, why not? Right? Like, why not?
I like the idea of having an annual ritual to do that. For something like 18 years in a row, I started year 2000. I wrote 2000 words about year 2000 as the year, and then 2001 years about 2000, 2001 words about 2001, etc., etc. And around when I got divorced, I couldn't do it anymore.
Mm.
Like I thought, like I had an audience for it. There was a whole bunch of friends who were like, "Hey, where's my 2000 words about your year?" kind of thing. And I was like, I had such a weird year that I feel like I can't. And consistently, every one of these annual screeds would start as 5,000 words, and then I'd have to edit it down to 2,000. And I couldn't even, like, you saying that this is a way that you got to know yourself
Mm.
really struck a chord, I think is what I'm saying. It's so fascinating how sometimes writing can be the thing that goes, oh. And I imagine you found a bunch of stuff where you're like, oh, God.
Yeah. In that process, like I had used shame as this like mechanism for controlling my behavior. And of course it
Right.
like it doesn't work. It's such dirty fuel. Like it's
Yeah.
such a dirty motivator for like, doing the things and being the person you
Yeah,
want.
you're in Appalachia mining for coal, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I use the analogy all the time that like this process has been going from coal to green energy, right? Like
Right.
it's messy, people have got a lot of complaints, but like eventually it's much better for you and the environment. In that process, I discovered that like I was using shame to manage everything, right? If you put the facts on the table, then you can analyze the facts, but that your emotions and your nervous system and the facts don't always align. And in fact, like your nervous system isn't motivated to give you facts. It's motivated to give you safety. And when you've spent your whole life feeling constantly and perpetually unsafe, it's like none of the facts line up. And so that process, I would say it like saved my life in a lot of ways. It gave me life, maybe is a better descriptor, because I don't know how much living I was doing before. I know I was surviving. I know that I had made it. I know that in terms of capitalism, I was succeeding. I knew like I had these markers of other people's expectations, but I can't say that internally I thought that like the first 38 years of my life were particularly great.
And
Can't,
this is where it gets
yeah,
particularly insidious, I think, as somebody who's autistic, right? Like, I often find myself measuring myself by other people's yardsticks.
yeah.
And I have done a bunch of stuff that are objectively impressive and successful. And it doesn't matter if you've made a bunch of money and you're in what looks like a successful relationship and you're like standing on top of the world if you're like a little ball of shame walking around.
Yeah, it's that pit, like that, what is it? That like self-esteem is so temporary. Or,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, ego is so temporary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it burns hot, it gives you some dopamine, and then it runs out, and then it has no actual nutritional value.
I feel like
This
I should do a
process,
podcast with Elon Musk about that.
Please don't give him any more airtime.
I don't think he would. Oh God.
I'll help you write the invite email. Uh,
Apropos ego, yeah. I
um,
think if we were at the best invite email ever, I don't think he'll definitely want to appear.
I don't know. We'll just offer to sign up for whatever program he's working on now.
Yeah, sure. Goodness.
Oh,
Anyway, let's move on from
yeah.
that. So I'm curious, we talked about a few potential topics for this podcast, and one of the ones we talked about was addiction. And I'm curious if that feels alive in you and whether you want to have that conversation.
Yeah, we could totally do it. I mentioned 3 years ago I got fired, and it was just a dark era. The truth of the reality is that at that time, I had assembled these, I don't know, we had these like 50 really smart humans who I was working with on a daily basis. I was sitting in the center of this really complex problem. We were successful. We had all the problems that early stage companies do. And I was as happy as I'd ever been. It was hard, but I was happy. And when I lost my job, it was this basically just like slap in the face because I realized I like had no life infrastructure, right? Like I had this one thing, and so long as I had it, things were okay. And I probably would have done it for 10 more years. And we talked about forcing functions, and I can say right now, 3 years later, I'm so grateful for the forcing function of that process. But the amount of my whole life had been this like series of rejections at the earliest stage from my mother, then my father, and then just like this constant, I was never enough. I was never worth keeping around. I was an invaluable human. And when I lost the thing that I had built, thinking that I was somehow unlosable, it just flipped this switch in my brain. And I went the day, it was a morning, and I went and bought this bottle of tequila. And I think I drank for 3 days. And I just had this like terrible 3 month window where it was like, I didn't know how to deal with the pain. I didn't know how to deal with these feelings. I didn't know how to deal with the loss because you're in full grief, right? You lose the people, you lose, I went from having like 100 emails a day to nothing, right? The
Right.
quiet is suffocating
It's
when
one of
you've
those
been
really
running.
loud quiets, isn't it?
Yeah. And you could say that like it was a gift. In the hindsight, it is, but fundamentally at the time, like the only thing I wanted was this thing. And I didn't know how to be anything else. I knew how to be a tech founder. I knew how to build a business. I knew how to train language models. Like I knew how to do this stuff, but I didn't know how to be a human. And so I had this really dark 3 month window where there was no reason to be alive, right? There was nothing holding me, like tethering me to the fabric of community or the earth in general. And I drank myself stupid. And ultimately, it's a gift. Right? It is a gift. It's been a gift because it was the forcing function, right? I needed to go to this bottom. And so I had this like moment where it's so silly because there's a lot of reasons people go and get sober. There's high bottoms, there's low bottoms. My bottom included me killing a cactus. And if you look at my apartment, there's 45 plants in here. I
Right.
don't kill plants. And so I had this thing where I like missed
And
a
cacti are
calendar.
hard to kill.
Correct. And so I like had this thing where it was this like 2 week window where I had killed this cactus. I had missed a lunch date, the one lunch date that I had the whole month. Like I was just out of sorts. And I was like, I'm neither dumb nor bad at plants. And it was just that, oh, okay. And I started in AA. And like that has been an interesting journey as a neurodivergent person. And actually, one of the reasons that I think this is a fun topic is because 12 step is definitely the predominant way that most people get sober. And it has a lot of features to it. And some of them are super neurodivergent, positive for neurodivergence. And then some of them are really freaking hard to swallow. And so I spent basically a year untangling the program and just trying to figure out the part of it that made the most sense for me.
Like, there's 12 steps. Which one's can I hack kind of thing?
Well,
Well, and the
yeah, there's,
success rate of AA is about 15%, right? So there's also that. Even looking at that, I'm like, there's got to be something better. But that's a
I don't
different
know.
conversation.
Yeah, and like we could do 10 hours on that one. I think it depends on the lens at which you view addiction, right? The reasons why people drink, mine is very specific. I was a tortured child who grew up to be a hyper capitalistic, you'll only love me if I'm good at my job and I make money, slash, I'm successful. And you take all those things away, and then I'm just a shell of a human. And so what I needed more than anything were just humans. I needed humans talking about problems. I needed to like give myself perspective on frankly how good I have it. But then also I just needed humans to co-regulate with for a while and to figure it out. Like I needed a place to be where nobody needed to ask me.
Yeah. There's so many pieces there. There's so many things I want to double click on or threads I want to pull. Have you found unconditional love since then?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I
And
think that's the thing you're describing, right? Being loved for being capitalistically successful, being loved for whatever the thing is. Yeah. Tell me.
it's not transactional anymore,
Right.
right? Love isn't a transaction. My value isn't transactional. I would say the first step of it was this. I mentioned earlier, like ego is loud, and it is. It's freaking loud. And when you're raised by narcissists, you have more ego and no self confidence.
Right.
And so part of it was that like reverberating into from one fuel to the other. And as I did that, then it became easier not to think of other people as dangerous, right? Because everybody was dangerous. You were dangerous for a lot of reasons, most of which was just I was afraid of everything, because how can you not be when you grew up the way I did? The part about specifically like my experience within like the AA system and like getting to where I am now is that like I like myself a lot on a daily basis. Like I really like myself. I think that I'm a cool guy. And I don't require other people to serve my needs the way that I did years ago, right? I asked a lot from the people in my life. I didn't have any coping mechanisms. I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't have any ability to functionally just say no and be okay with it, right? Like I constantly sought approval. And when you're neurodivergent, like it's so hard because you very rarely get approval. What is it? 2% of the population will identify with you. You get 98 no's before you get one freaking yes.
Yeah.
And like that's hard. And AA at least has given me this place where like I let my freak flag fly. Like I am who I am. I no longer apologize for it. And like with very rare exceptions, it's fully accepted and like almost expected because there's a lot of people with freak flags in the program.
I buy that. Like I've not been through AA, and as a autistic person, I can't think of anything scarier than walking through those doors for the first time in a
Yeah.
completely like the only relationship I have with things like that are television. What was that like for you?
Oh, horrific. But
Yeah.
remember, my brain was so broken at the time. I was so deeply griefed, like in grief. But also, I was desperate. Like, I'd done this 3 month run of like just drinking and nothing, right? For months. Nothing to talk about, no problems to work on, like, no joy. I keep a clean apartment. Like, I got my little structure. It works for me. And everything fell apart. And I felt like I just would look in the mirror and I was like, I don't even know who this human is because I didn't know who I was at the time. And so, that level of desperation like put the anxiety down. I will tell you, the first time I raised my hand I was like this the whole time. And it's funny that I'm very resentful to this one person and she does not deserve it, but she just didn't pick me. And it was like the first time I tried to share, and I'm so mad at her because I was like, the bravery I'm bringing to this moment. And she was just like, just fully ignored me. And I was like, damn you. I saw her 3 days ago and I looked at her which is
Still on my
fully
shit list.
which is fully irrational, but it's just one of those funny things because it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did it, but it's hard.
What did it give you?
What did it give me? It gave me the confidence. So there's this weird AA love sayings. It's a little corny sometimes, and like one of them, I think of it as like the neurodivergent like flag. We should just get a flag and say it's like your opinion of me is none of my business. And I love it so deeply because
Mm-hmm.
it's basically a blank check for unmasking, right? It doesn't matter.
Right.
Like how you want to react, what you want to think about it is like unimportant to my lived experience. And it gave me just this like weird confidence to just not care. And it's not caring in the sense of I'm an immoral or unethical human. It's not caring in the sense of this doesn't harm you. I don't care. It doesn't have an impact on any other human. I don't care. I can
Right.
do whatever the hell I want. And it doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need to be answered for. It doesn't even need to be told to you why I'm doing it. It's just, it is what it is. And if you have an opinion, shut the fuck up. Like,
Feel free to roll it up tight and shove it where it's out
uh,
of the way.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it gave me that community. I'd never had a group of friends before. Like I'd had these piecemeal friends, and a lot of those relationships were highly transactional.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a core group of 6 friends, and like we vacation together, and they're all weird in the best way possible. And like to exist inside of, I would say that it's the most family system I've ever experienced, where it's like we all poke fun of each other, but there's lines, and then there's just this like undying level of support. Like something bad happens, and the whole group activates. And the cost of that for me is I have to let other people believe that there's a God, right? Like I have to do a little bit of the song and dance sometimes, but not more than I want to. And yeah,
It
that's
turns
worth
out you've
it.
been masking your whole life. That's a small mask that you can hold up.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's much easier.
Yeah. I've had a really interesting journey with religion in that I am extremely unreligious. But also, I see that it gives some people so much hope and strength. And I'm like, you know what? That's beautiful for you.
Yeah.
I think you're delusional, but that's none of my business. And so I'm going to keep it to myself. That has nothing to do with it's, and it's that judgment
It's,
piece. I'm like, and maybe there's a little bit of envy in there. It seems like that would be really easy if that could work for me.
well, it's funny you say this because I was like 6 months into this process, and right, God's a big part of higher power, whatever you want to describe it. But the most generally just like digestible version and a 12 step is God. And so I was like 6 months in, and I went on this like question fest, which was like, what is God? Right. And I'd never sincerely asked the question. Catholicism had been used like a hammer to the head my whole childhood. And I can't particularly say that there's anything intriguing and or interesting to me about organized religion.
Mhm.
And so, but I was like, well, if we're going to make the decision, let's do the research.
Very autistic of you.
Yeah. And so I talked to one of my aunts, and she's probably one of my favorite people in my family. And so she's the one that suggested when I asked if I was autistic, maybe do the trauma work. Anyway, so I asked her, and she goes, listen, she goes, it doesn't even matter. She goes, but it's a crime that somebody took it away from you. And that was an interesting open to at least, I can say, earnestly considering whether I believed it or not. Because she's right. Like the comfort that other people get, the place in the world that they get, the like lack of existential crisis that comes. There's so many unanswerable
Community. You
questions.
can always walk
There's
into a building and have people.
correct. And there's so many unanswered questions that are implied to be answered within those systems. And that's cool, right? If you can believe it. But after about 4 months of literally asking every human on earth that I could meet, including one woman on the bus, I just came to the conclusion. I was like, I love that other people do this. In the scope of AA, like I love that people are alive and all it took was believing in God. I don't care. I don't care what it takes to keep you alive. I just want you alive. And so in that way, I think it's beautiful, as you said, but it's just I've yet to find a reason to adopt that belief system
Yeah.
personally.
Well, and what a wonderful thing to actually have spent some time with and made like a informed, thoughtful decision. I think that is actually a really inquisitively integrated way of living.
Yeah, but that's one of the gifts of having a bottom. Recovery has a few forcing functions, and one of them is what I've been doing doesn't work, so why don't we just question everything? And that's one of
Does
those
this touch?
questions.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
speaking over you a little. I think there might be a little bit of a delay. I'm sorry. Do you feel like being in recovery or being an addict is part of your identity?
Hmm. The only way I can answer that is I like the simplicity of being a recovered human.
Right.
I like that I've learned how to use my brain at a full speed. I like that I got COVID 2 weeks ago and it was miserable, mostly because I just missed being me. And that's a nice gift. I think that there's a lot of ways of thinking about it. I don't know. And actually, I can say I do know. I wouldn't be here without having done it. Right. There just would never have been enough reasons to question some of these like core underlying things that had been rotting inside of me for so long
Mhm.
without it. And so for me, it's does it matter? It isn't a part like I participate in a way that makes sense for me. I certainly don't work the program the way most people do. I don't keep a sponsor. I haven't done the 12 steps. I like the meetings, but I only go to one or two, maybe a week. I am fundamentally addicted to the additive nature of recovery, not the subtractive one, right? I don't take the view of this is punishment. You're going to die if you have a beer. It just doesn't make sense for me. The thing that keeps me happy is just this my life keeps getting bigger and more interesting. And that's better than any beer I've ever had. And it's just fundamentally better. And so I guess I'm walking around your question. I think that I like just having the clarity of it. I don't know if it exists in the same definition as most people, though. Does
I
that make
think
sense?
that's a perfect answer. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think identity is so interesting, right? And how we self-identify, how we present to the world, and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard you label yourself with a few things: autistic, gay. I'm always curious about the labels that we put on ourselves that feel truly representative of who we are in some way. And
Hmm.
once we're like, okay, this is a stand-in for something else, but it fits well enough. And the
Hmm.
sense I'm getting from you is that in recovery is, okay, it's a shortcut. If somebody tries to force you into drinking, or, hey, why don't you have a glass of wine with us? You can say, look, I'm in recovery. That ends the conversation, right? That doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that it's a fully integrated part of your identity, but it is a wonderful shortcut for ending a conversation that you're not prepared to have. Or, look, we can have a deep conversation about this, but why bother? It's small talk at this point.
Yeah, it's not interesting, right?
Right,
Like it's fun. It's interesting in terms of, I know that lots of people struggle, and I am not ashamed about it. I
right,
will tell you that acquiring the label alcoholic took a minute, mostly because alcoholism runs in my family and nobody ever recovered. And so alcoholics were always labeled horrific human beings. And like
right,
when I started going into this process, like it was hard. It's the same as exact same thing with gay, right?
right,
Like when I was 16 living in Ohio in a Catholic family that conveniently loved homophobia, right? Like it was so dangerous to be that
right,
thing because if you were that thing, you were ostracized, you were abused, you were all that stuff. And like I had that same emotional nervous system stuff with the alcoholism. And like there, I am just at a point now where it's you can't harm me by calling me a gay person. You can't harm
right.
me by calling me autistic. You can't harm me by calling me an alcoholic. None of it matters because I'm 100 other things that are more interesting than any of those.
Yeah.
And that's the gift.
I think that is the interesting thing about addiction. And what I think people often forget is that if you are many things and you occasionally do a line of coke, are you addicted? Are you not? It doesn't matter, but it isn't your entire being and identity.
Yeah.
If crack cocaine is the only thing you live for, that is a completely different thing. And the identity piece of this is, what percentage of your identity is this label? And I think, like, purely philosophically, there's a lot to that, because, well, labels is how people perceive you, especially in the early
Mm.
moments. And in the story that you just told about coming to a recognition about your own alcoholic label, I imagine for you, because you described briefly about a challenging childhood, that is interwoven with the things that people did when they drank. Is that true?
Yeah, so my parents didn't drink, their parents did. And
Got
so
it.
my mom's big win on earth was that she didn't drink. She did everything else incorrect, but that was the
Okay.
one thing she didn't do.
Yeah.
But because of that, the alcoholics in her life were villains,
Right.
right? And like we just grew up from the earliest days thinking that alcoholism was the lowest form of ethical existence, that you
Right.
were a morally deprived human who had no right to be alive. Because again, nobody ever recovered. You never got to see what it was like when somebody got healthy. And so it's funny, it's like I don't speak with my parents, but neither one of them know I did this thing. And not because I'm ashamed of it, just because it's like, what's the point?
Right. No,
But
I hear you.
I don't need their
And it's the thing,
approval.
like, and you don't
Yep.
owe them that,
Yeah.
right? There's no, like, social contract or desire, and why should you at
Yeah.
that point? I'm curious, sorry. I'm curious if you've perceived that your autism in any way affected your addiction and what that looked for you.
Yeah. I think that if you were to like encapsulate all of it, it was like a discomfort with being a human, right? And I think that it played one of those things. I don't know if it was always the loudest voice, but it's so hard to discern when you were just so traumatized, right? I just had this bleeding wound and I walked around with it on a daily basis. And I don't know exactly which cut was bleeding the most, but they were all bleeding.
Right.
I think that it fundamentally actually probably saved my life. I think that, right, in terms of getting out of it, getting into recovery, being able to ask really hard questions, like fundamentally believing it that just because I had a nervous system that was built one way didn't mean that it had to exist that way for forever.
Right.
I could suspend the belief of my exact reality against the thesis. Have you ever read Danny Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like I could believe that like my brain was hardwired to avoid loss, but the thing I was losing I didn't like. So I could mental model my way out of it. It wasn't comfortable, don't get me
Right.
wrong. My body fought every frickin' inch. But like at the end of the day, I do think that like the autism stuff has been the gift of all of this, is because it's like I do ask these weird questions that everybody's overthinking and I don't
Right.
care. No.
Well, and what you describe as You've mentioned bottom-up thinking, you've mentioned weird questions. And I think what that really boils down to is like a kind of first principles thought model. Going right back to, okay, what's the root cause? It's like the five
Yeah.
why system. Ask why 5 times and see what the root cause is. And if you think you found the root cause, ask why a few more times. And if you do that often enough, I had that as one of my tools in therapy. If you do that often enough and the same root cause comes up again and again, okay, maybe it's time to start working on this thing.
Mhm.
And that is one of the superpowers, I think, of autism. If I don't understand it, I just don't understand what's underneath. Let's keep going. Right.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting because it takes a long time. And it's often, there's a lot of shame in there for me.
Yeah. But that's what the user manual was. It was me asking every foundational question and every day just going in and rooting through myself in order to get to the truth of it. And like, I will say, I was a year into recovery when I did that. And I had a hard year. I'd had to make some hard choices. We have this like saying, which is your secrets keep you sick. And when I first came in, I thought the application was around things like ice knock a drink. And I think for a lot of people, it is that, right? It's the like tattling on yourself process because it's complicated.
Right.
It's a complicated thing to get yourself out of. And for me, there were these like foundational beliefs that I had and specific to like my relationship with my parents that like I needed to look at. And I needed to realize that even though I was 38, I was still being abused on a daily basis. And that abuse cost me a lot. And like the clarity of being able to ask that question and then to make choices that were like pro my mental health and pro my life, that's a freaking hard thing to do. It is hard to walk away from your parents and say, I love you, but you are killing me and you don't know how to stop. You are incapable of taking care of me and I need taken care of. And like the only person who's going to raise me is me. And it's going to be right now because I was never raised. And I guess in terms of this process, that's what this journey has been. And that user manual was 6 months before I had made some really hard choices about designing my life that were hard, right? It's hard to say, you birthed me and I just can't have you in my life. I love you. I deeply love you, but I do not forgive you for doing the things that you did. And I don't have to forgive you in order to feel okay. I can accept that this is who you are. And if I do, then I need to make choices. And so I had been in grief again. So it was like I'd lost my job. And then a year later, I was fully in grief over not technically being orphaned, but feeling orphaned.
Yeah.
That was 6 months later. I was writing this user manual. I was like, I just need to do this thing. Because at that point, what's funny is that, like, with a 6 month break from the family, from the abuse, it was like the first time I could actually start asking myself, like, what the hell is going to make you happy? Who are you? And I don't know, again, if I would have been able to, that's a pretty jam-packed 2 years. I just don't know if I would have been able to do it if I wasn't autistic. That 3 month work of writing that user manual saved me 10 years of therapy. And that's just the truth of it.
If somebody listens to this and goes, that actually sounds interesting, do you have any tips for how or where to start?
I started with the most basic parts of myself, right? Like I'm monocular. And so like the sensory stuff was interesting. And then that led into the I see all colors. It's a wild thing to write down on a piece of paper, but I'm not colorblind. And so it started in like the most, we'll call it like unlitigatable facts, right? That these things are just true. And then I went from there into kind of like how my brain processes stuff. And this is fantastically interesting because like I never realized I had hyperphantasia until this process.
What's that?
I can see pretty vivid pictures in my brain. I think it's what
Mm.
makes me good at systems is I have a
Mm-hmm.
model for them that just builds naturally. There was this like one moment in like when Game of Thrones was out and I'd read the books years before. I love fantasy novels. And then I watched Game of Thrones, like the first episode, and I forgot what the story looked like in my head from the books. And I grieved because I was like, I had this whole world that existed in my brain that like just got wiped away with one episode of television. And like, that's hyperphantasia.
I had exactly the same thing with Game of Thrones. And
Really?
I found Game of Thrones so vulgar. Like the pictures in my mind were wilder and crazier. My then wife and I started just calling the show Tits and Dragons. Because, right? That was, and
Ah,
it was just one of those things. It was like, okay, I had that same moment of grief. How funny. Yeah.
yeah. But that's because your brain processes, I'm guessing your brain processes images better than the average human.
I've written 20 books about photography.
Yeah,
The
there it
answer
is.
is yes.
Same for me. It's when at my last company, people they would propose a tech change. And I'd be like, yeah, but the problem over here. And they're like, what? And I was like, it's 6 systems away, but I can see the data flowing through. It's
Right.
what makes me great at what I do. I just can build this like little world inside of my head and keep track of it.
I once had a meltdown when I thought about the complexity of an API that had a change in it. And how do you deprecate an old API when lots of systems depend on this? And even if you fix a bug, right? Fix a bug, i.e., change
Mhm.
something in the API, that might change significantly somebody who implemented something that actually uses that bug as a feature. I was like, oh God,
Um,
the
but
complexity of that just makes my brain hurt.
not to be too much of a bottoms up thinker, but why are you changing the endpoint at all? Why not just adjust it?
Of
Why would you
course,
need to delete it?
sure, totally. It's dumb shit, like
Mm,
whether it's encapsulated
well,
by apostrophes or whatever. I don't know.
uh,
It's You are correct. I love this
but
stuff, man.
I do too.
But sorry, we were
Yeah.
talking about your
The
manual
user
and where
manual.
people start.
So I started with the just immutable characteristics. I'm monocular and moved my way through the chain. The second one was like how I perceive information because that was interesting to learn about, right? I just
Hmm.
hadn't really thought about that was when I decided I was autistic. That you do things in a certain way. Like I didn't understand bottoms up thinking until then. Like I just didn't know that this is how I had been perceiving the world until I started litigating my life and experiences and being like, oh yeah, there's just too many analogous experiences to say that you're not somewhere neurospicy. From there, I moved into my ethics, right? Which was the, like, this is just the stuff I believe. And like what I have up there now is each page is a little bit of all of it. But like the ethics stuff was interesting because there's just, I don't know. A lot of it came from my experience as a founder. And it was like, if it's a job, then it's by nature transactional. And so the both ends should be looking at how the value works. And that's the negotiation. Companies aren't families. And not particularly new idea, but I just went through and just wrote them all down. The part around like the how to interact with me, right? I just wanted to be clear, right? Humans make me nervous. They just do. And they make me less nervous now than they did. But I got hit a lot as a kid. Like people are dangerous in like the core of my function, like how I'm
Hmm.
functionally built. And so there's that. And also just, yeah, there's that.
Do you feel like you're starting from a safer place with people now? Like when you meet
Yeah.
a new person?
Yeah. 100%. I think that I mentioned earlier, like I asked a lot from other people. I needed them to take care of me in like the most rudimentary ways. And that's the crime of my childhood is that like I was this 38-year-old man who like behaved like an 8-year-old sometimes. And not because of cognition, just because of trauma.
What does behaving like an 8-year-old in this context mean?
I think that in a lot of ways, like I was a bully. I was smarter than most people, and I could definitely beat you down with my cognition if I wanted to. And when things diverged, I would need to be right. And that being right was a self-esteem thing, right? I didn't like myself, so being right was an important way to give me the little
Well,
bit
it's
of
a great way
dopamine.
to boost your ego, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a temporary fix. It's a dirty fuel. People don't love it. Why would they? And it was just this, I had to control all the pieces on the board in order to turn down my brain even 10%. And it's unsustainable. And so, but that's what an 8-year-old does, right? You get stuck at these places where you were required to do these things. And that was just how it was. I also couldn't believe nice things because I didn't like myself. I couldn't believe anything that you said unless I had somehow manipulated you into saying it. And then even then, it was not particularly great. And having grown up with narcissists, like that's the game. You don't
Right.
feel good. You don't feel good ever. And so you're constantly externalizing your validation. And so I'm not narcissistic, but I definitely had narcissistic habits because how can you not?
Totally. And I think what I'm hearing in all of that is a really deep desire to feel like you're in control.
Yeah.
Control is an illusion. But if you manage to make other people do things, that feeling of being in control is pretty strong. And I think there's something to that. There's this thing where if you feel like you're in control, you feel safe. And so I can see the steps towards how you got to there. Okay, if I just do this thing, I will feel like I'm in control. And when I feel like I'm in control, I feel safe. And
Yep.
that's a totally, it's not a nice or kind defense mechanism, but it's definitely a defense mechanism.
Hmm. Yeah. And it was the way that I got through life for 38 years. It was the only way I knew how to get through life. Nobody had ever taught me anything different.
Right. Well, and you were specifically taught that because that's how you
Mhm.
grew up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you able to find some kindness for yourself around that?
Yeah. Again, I think this is one of those like gifts of autism is that once I started unwinding shame, this is a funny story. So I found these journals from when I was fifth grade. Right.
How
That's
old
when
are people
just,
in fifth grade, roughly?
I think like 9.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was keeping these journals. Life was bad. And I was keeping these journals. And at the time I was enrolled in parochial school and I knew I was gay. Like I knew I was gay when I was 8. And like by the time 9 rolled around, it was like, oh, this isn't going to change. And again, one of the gifts I think of Neurospicy was like, this is an immutable characteristic. So I'm just going to have to figure out how to do it. There was never a moment where I was like, I should date women. It didn't
Yeah.
work. It didn't work. Like my brain just was like, no, you're gay. Boys are cute. And so I have this journal of me writing endlessly about wanting to become a priest. And it's like a heart wrenching thing where I'm just like super religious in this thing. And I think back on this like kid that was sitting in this situation and who had no choices because at that point, the only math for being alive and being loved as a queer person was to join a religious sect and become a priest because that was what you did, right? That those people didn't need women, right? That was the solution. And so when you ask if I look back in kindness, like this one still hurts a little bit because I just think
Mm.
about how sad that kid was, right? And like how hard his life must have been that the
Oh,
only way to look at the world of being loved and accepted was through that lens.
because
It,
that was the only universe where it would be okay to not marry and to live a life of celibacy and whatnot.
it was the only way people were going to love me was if I did
Oh,
this thing.
God. I am
Yeah,
so sorry.
can't
What was
read
it like
them.
to read that back?
I read 2 pages and I was like, oh, I know what this is. And so it's part of my journey right now in this accepting myself and loving myself is I'm going to read it over the next couple of months and I'm going to put the time in and I'm going to mourn that kid, right? He's dead now. He's not
Yeah.
alive, but he, like, I no longer live under those constraints or even that lack of self love.
Are you open to an invitation?
Sure.
I would love for you to write that kid a letter
Mm,
and to write a eulogy for him.
yeah.
Because, as you said, he's dead, but nobody's had a chance to really. He's doing his best.
Oh, he's doing his best. And so you asked if I have empathy for myself. I do.
Yeah, I can
That
see
kid's
that.
life, that kid's life sucked.
Right. Well, and here
um,
you are, smiling, laughing.
no
It took you
cortisol in
30
my
years from
system.
there,
Yeah,
but.
yeah.
And better late than never, right? And I feel like even in the depths of having been sacked from your own company and drinking yourself to within a quarter inch of the end of your life, I feel like in there, you're also telling a story of, no, fuck you. I'm not
Yeah.
letting this take me, kind of thing.
It's like I got, how do I phrase this? It's like trauma got me for 40. I get the 40 for myself. And that's it. That's the math. We're done. And
Yeah.
that's been the gift. That is the gift.
Does it still nip at your ankles from time to time? Or is it fully behind you?
So I went down another rabbit hole in AA around acceptance and forgiveness.
Uh-huh.
And so for 6 months, I asked everybody what the difference was because they get me to the same result, but they're different tools, right?
Yeah.
They're fundamentally different. Like you apply them differently in different places, even though the thing that you get is relief and not ruminating and healing, right? And once I figured that out, like what I needed and how I needed to apply it, I mentioned earlier, I accept my parents. I love them. I do not forgive them. And that's enough. Like it's enough for me to just be done. I
Right.
accept that they had hard lives. They accept they repeated bad behavior. I accept that they didn't do better. I don't forgive them for not doing better. It was their job. They're the one that brought me into this earth. It was their job not to abuse.
Mhm.
And in that process, like within those two things, like I don't actually need both of them to get to where I want to be. I just need one of the two
Mhm.
tools. That's just been kind of the light bulb moment of the last couple of years. Is that's I've got these two things. They're both inevitable, right?
Right.
And if I'm not applying, then it's all on me because I'm the one eating it at that
So,
moment.
in your own words, what is the difference between acceptance and forgiveness?
So I think it's a good question. Forgiveness is, I think of forgiveness as like a single serve solution, right? Like you do a thing, I forgive you, and the general contract between us is that this thing won't happen again. And if it does, we'll have another conversation, but I'm not going to forgive you for repeated behavior or for having a view that I'm not worthy of something. Acceptance is you are incapable of doing the thing I need you to do. Acceptance is that this dog bites.
Right.
And if the dog bites, then at that point, it's my choice to either go to the dog, but I can't be mad at the dog if it bites me anymore, right? Because I
Right.
accept that it's a dog that has sharp teeth. And in which case, like, it's my job to fix the problem. And so in
Right.
forgiveness,
Just
it's
you and
a,
shin guards.
yeah, it's just me and shin guards, those hockey, like that hockey padding.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's what I think of it. And so there's a lot of choices. We get to make choices. We get to make a lot of choices. And like we have more options than we think we do. And in that, like that's like I can accept that you're gonna always do this thing, or I can just make choices that are good for me.
I think that's beautiful. And I think that's a really beautiful place to wrap. I promised to keep this to under an hour and almost got there. I have a couple of questions that I like to end on. And the first one is, what do you wish people knew about autism?
It's not our job to accommodate you in this like unmasking journey. I'll just give you an example. A couple weeks ago, I was in this like group thing and somebody was upset about something and they came over to me and they were complaining. And I looked at him, I was like, this is obviously not about me. Good luck. I don't want to participate in this. This is uninteresting to me. And what was funny is in my head, I'm like, yeah, that was easy. I moved on, didn't think twice about it. And 3 days later, I got this text message. You treated this so well. It's so interesting. You were so calm. And in my head, I was like, that was just like, I'm not doing the thing, dude. I just don't
Right.
have the energy to take care of you. And it's not my job to. None of this is that important.
You're seeing there is that clear boundaries are rare,
Yeah.
right? And clearly you had a
Well,
super clear boundary there, which is like,
yeah, it's just not about me.
yeah, that's awesome. And could you tell me of a time when you felt really seen and loved in exactly the right way for you?
Yeah. So I mentioned I have this aunt, and she's been a very important person in my life. And so when I was starting to do this work a couple of years ago, right, when I joined AA, I come from an abusive family system and I have these siblings, and they are wonderful human beings. But part of the systems exists as constantly perpetuating that I was the problem. And in that, there's a lot of denialism. There was a lot of denialism. And so I would go, and as I was seeking clarity, I would say truths out loud. And everybody would be like, no, it wasn't that big a deal. Get over it. And I had this aunt. And so it was so frustrating because it's like this, don't you guys see? And at that moment, it was so important for me to be seen because I just was like, I'd been so neglected. I just needed somebody to do this. And who better than the people who literally had it happen with you? And I just had this aunt, and she's a therapist. And she just called me and she goes, listen, Philip, everything you said is true. All of your lived experiences are true. All of it is true, and I see it. I'm sorry other people can't. And I just need you to know you are fully seen. And like it was necessary. It was a necessary moment because it's just you feel like you're going crazy in this stuff, right? Like you just feel like you're going crazy. And you didn't actually do anything wrong. But it's a very gifted way at just being like, you're a complete human. Every piece of you is lovable. And it's just I wouldn't be here without her help.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Philip, thank you so much for joining me. This was a wonderfully expansive conversation, and I wish we had 6 more hours to keep chatting, but maybe we'll
Yeah, it
have to
was
do
great to
another
meet
at some point.
It was great to meet you. I'm really grateful for you and the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the podcast. I hope you found it as enlightening and inspiring as I did. You can find us on TikTok under Autistic FM, on Instagram at autistic_FM, or on our website at autistic.fm. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Haje. It's been an absolute delight to have you here with me, and here's a random fact that delights me. Did you know that there's a tiny jellyfish nicknamed the immortal jellyfish? It's called the Turritopsis dohrnii, and it's a fascinating creature that can effectively turn back the clock on its own life cycle. When faced with injury or starvation, it can revert from its mature adult form back to its youthful polyp stage. Imagine pressing the reset button on your own life. And, well, if you're this particular jellyfish, that's exactly what you can do. It does that through a process called transdifferentiation, in which the jellyfish's cells transform from one type into another. And that makes it possible for it to regenerate from an adult back to a baby polyp. Scientists are totally in awe about the potential for unlocking secrets about aging and cellular rejuvenation in humans. So, the next time you're worried about aging, remember that there's a jellyfish out there that may just hold the key to eternal youth and potentially healing to a whole bunch of illnesses. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Take care and see you next time.